Hello and welcome back to the Seeker's Reset. I'm your host, Robert, and still here in the room in which I was raised as a child. My goal is to be out of here within the next 2 months, or at most by the end of the summer in the US. Um, yeah, maybe I'll do an episode on like where I am in my life periodically, and I might do that sometime soon. But for now, the topic of this episode is everything happens for a reason, the law of attraction. So I'm sure that you have either said or heard somebody say, in the midst, especially of some sort of difficulty or tragedy, that everything happens for a reason. It's funny, I've sometimes pointed this out to people that if everything happens for a reason, then everything happens for a reason. And what I mean by that is that so often when people use this expression, they apply it very selectively to situations. Okay. And typically the way it's applied is actually to prevent examination. So instead of let's figure out what the reason was, it's a statement that's made in order to try to move past something. Everything happens for a reason. And that's like the end of the discussion. Not everything happens for a reason. Let's discern, let's examine, let's investigate what that reason might be. So, the message behind this episode is mostly to say that, as far as I can tell, everything does happen for a reason. But when you actually think about that, it's really overwhelming that there is a possible reason for everything. In esotericism, it's cause and effect. With every effect, there is a cause, and every cause, there is an effect. Think about how many billions of causes and effects there are in any given moment and throughout a person's life. Billions, trillions, maybe. Perhaps infinite. What is our responsibility in all of that? If everything has a cause and everything happens for a reason, then where do we start? I think it's one of the most overwhelming things that makes a seeker seek so obsessively, is because we're looking for some sort of answer to that. On some level, we're overwhelmed with this feeling that like we can affect everything in our lives. Our actions, our choices, our inaction, and our indecision. All of it is contributing to the creation of our lives. Everything happens for a reason. Most of us take that for granted on some level. So now in Divine Truth, the teachings on which I base quite a lot of my life, and the teachings that mostly have been the impetus for what I would call my Seeker's Reset. Divine Truth, one of the most beautiful and interesting things about it is that Jesus talks about God's laws, that there are laws governing the universe that God put in place. And one of those laws is the law of attraction. So when we hear this statement, the law of attraction, in New Age circles or esoteric circles, I don't think many people, I certainly didn't, many people think of it as it's a law created for our experience by our creator. It's not just a pattern that we're picking up on, that it might actually be a law that was put in place for us to live by and to learn from and to benefit from in the end, if you believe in a loving God, which certainly Divine Truth espouses. So everything happens for a reason is very relevant in the context of the law of attraction, because everything that we attract into our lives will therefore be attracted into our lives for a reason. And then we can seek to either magnify that if it's what is nourishing us on a soul level, or we can seek to clear out whatever it is inside of us that is bringing something unhealthy or bad to us. There is also another law talked about in Divine Truth called the law of compensation. And the law of compensation is basically, it seems almost punitive on its face, but in reality, it is designed for a positive end. The law of compensation is more or less when we are unwilling to engage in a process of repentance for the things that we have done wrong in our lives, the sins that we have committed and that we have in our hearts. If we don't voluntarily engage that process, then the law of compensation acts upon us, basically forcing us to experience the negative consequences of the things that we have done or failed to do. But again, that means that things will come into our life, difficult things, hardship. But that hardship and that difficulty will come into our lives because it's designed to give us an experience so that we learn our lesson. And again, if we have if we believe in a loving God, then that experience will be specific. It won't be arbitrary. It won't be to inflict unnecessary suffering. It will be to inflict just the right amount and kind of pain so that we can wake up and learn. But again, everything happens for a reason in a world governed by those laws. Everything. And then each thing that we do produces an effect. So there is a law of cause and effect in Divine Truth as well. So the next time somebody says everything happens for a reason, number one, it's a very important moment to realize there's an opportunity to go deeper, to understand perhaps what the cause is. What is the reason? Because it's possible whatever this thing is that people are referring to could be avoided in the future if we examine the cause, if we feel it, if we release whatever it is inside of us that might have brought it on. The other thing is that anytime somebody says that, you can ask, do you really think that? Do you really think that? Because that means that even this conversation is happening for a reason. It means that, everything throughout your day is happening for a reason, not just these big events. And it can be used to encourage people and ourselves to consider, what are the reasons for these things that come into our lives? The seeker is generally attuned to the synchronicities of life, but also synchronicities get turned on their head. If you watch my video on spiritual rock bottom, there are moments in life when the synchronicities, I don't know if there's a word for this. It is still a synchronicity, but it's like a dark synchronicity. It's like the opposite, because we tend to think of synchronicities in a positive light. Well, what if the opposite happens? Where suddenly everything is happening exactly like in ways that seem synchronistic, but it's all negative, or it feels negative. That's scary. And if you are experiencing a version of spiritual rock bottom like I've described in the other video, then you might be having that experience where all the things that used to seem where synchronistic things used to seem beautiful and leading to something exciting, now synchronistic things seem scary and leading to doom. Even though perhaps underneath that, you may be aware that that's not true, that these negative synchronicities are actually something akin to the law of compensation or the law of attraction, bringing up your emotions of fear, anxiety, anger, so that you can feel those emotions and release them. Or perhaps all of those things are happening for the reason of trying to push us into ending our self-absorbed sense of self-reliance and to become more reliant on God. Definitely has been true in my case. But sometimes it's really hard to imagine that everything happens for a reason. And that somehow in a loving universe, the underlying reason is loving for everything. But only if we have the self-responsibility and the humility and the sincerity, all words and terms that have been revivified by my studying divine truth. If we have those things, sincerity, humility, and self-responsibility and faith, then we can begin to see through what appears to be negative to find the love. And there's a lot more that could be said here. It's a very interesting expression. Everything happens for a reason. Because a lot of people use that expression without really thinking about it. Don't let it be the end of a conversation. Don't let it be the end of a train of thought. If anything, let it be a reminder that in everything, we can grow. So I'll leave it there, a little shorter. I actually like this length more than others. And it's been a bit, maybe a bit more musing than others, but I hope that this perspective is going to broaden your own perspectives and give you new angles from which to view these things. I'll link some videos, law to divine truth material on the law of attraction, the law of compensation, and the law of cause and effect in the description below. And otherwise, thank you as always for joining me. And I wish you very well in your current journey. This has been another episode of The Seeker's Reset. Take care.